The news that O.J. Simpson, the American football player who was accused of and then acquitted of the murders of his ex-wife and her friend, has died of cancer at 76. His family released the following statement a little earlier. On April the 10th, our father, O.J. Simpson, succumbed to his battle with cancer. He was surrounded by his children and grandchildren. During this time of transition, said his family asked that you please respect their wishes for privacy and grace. Let's talk to Donte Mills, National Trial Attorney at Mills and Edwards and Law Professor at Temple University and Beasley School of Law. Professor Mills, good afternoon from London.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me on.
Well, this is an interesting day in many ways. What would you say about O.J. Simpson?
O.J. Simpson was a phenomenal figure in a lot of aspects, from his sports career, where he excelled and really made a name for himself and left his mark on the sports industry. And then kind of came known as a divider, really, for a nation that was torn in two when he had his murder trial. And I think that is what he will mainly be remembered for, because there's half of a nation who believed that he was innocent and half believed he was guilty, but he stood up against the system and he won. And it was at a time where that really was not happening, especially as a black man in America. If you were deemed guilty, it was almost a sure thing that you were found guilty. But O.J. Simpson stood his ground, and he walked out of that courtroom as a victor. And that really, I think, changed the course of our country. And he was the person behind that. Whether it was right or wrong, the jury decided he was innocent. And I think that's really what he's going to be remembered for, standing up against the system and winning.
I mean, forgive me, I hope I haven't misinterpreted this, but you seem to be speaking of him as an almost heroic figure. That will seem strange, I think, to many people.
Well, heroic in the sense that in our country, everybody, and I'm a lawyer here, and I think it's very, very important that everybody understands that you are guilty until proven, I'm sorry, you are innocent until proven guilty. And there was a time in our country where it wasn't deemed that way for certain people, that a certain people were guilty once it was decided by anybody that they were, and you did not have to be proven guilty. You did not have the same presumption of innocence as everybody else. And whether you believe O.J. Simpson committed a crime or not, he had the right to be innocent until proven guilty. And he represented that right for a lot of people. I can go and fight my case and win. And that's something that really wasn't happening before OJ.
Can you perhaps put into perspective for us just how famous this man was? He was a former footballer, but he was more than that in the States. He was a film star. He was a huge figure. Everyone knew him.
Absolutely. I don't think there's anybody in any generation where you say the name OJ Simpson and they would not know who you were talking about. Now, it depends on their age and what generation they were, what they saw OJ as. Some people still see him as a football player because they grew up in the era where he really dominated the game of football. And everything else is kind of a backstory. Some people were introduced to him, though, later in life as a movie star and then with his battles with the law in our country. But everybody knows who he is.
But in a later civil trial, of course, he was found liable of the killings, wasn't he?
Absolutely. And in our country, there's a different standard. So in a criminal case, you have to be proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, and he was not found guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. In a civil case, you can be found liable where it's more likely than not that you committed, the crime or that you're responsible. So he was deemed to be more likely than not to have committed that crime, and he was held responsible in a civil case. But I think his story goes beyond whether or not he actually did it. It was really just the sense that he had the right to a trial and that he was given the same presumption
Yeah.
as everybody else.
Yeah, I get that. And I think this is it's an American set of circumstances, which we in the UK, many of us, certainly white people in the UK, might struggle to fully understand. And I take your point, but do you believe that he killed his wife and her friend?
I have to go by what the jury said in his criminal trial, that he did not. I do believe that there was a lot of evidence there to suggest that he did, but as a lawyer, I have to rely on our system, and our jury looked at all the facts. They had more information than anybody else because the jury was shown everything that there is to see, and the jury said he did not do it. And I have to rely on that. I have to trust our system, and that's really, where what he represents: trust in our system.
Thank you very much. Interesting perspective from Donte Mills, who is a national trial attorney and he's a law professor in the United States, just reacting to the news that we had just before 4 o'clock that O.J. Simpson has died at the age of 76. And if you're too young to remember, let's go back to 1995 and the verdict in his murder trial.
In the matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, case number BA097211. We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant Orenthal James Simpson not guilty of the crime of murder in violation of Penal Code Section 187A, a felony upon Nicole Brown Simpson.
There we are. That was the verdict in O.J. Simpson's murder trial back in the mid-90s. And it was, Fee, one of those, it was a kind of, at the time that breaking news and rolling news had just started in the UK on radio and on telly. And this was a huge story, wasn't it? Absolutely massive.
Well, it was. And there are many various documentary series and fictionalised accounts of what happened, particularly on that night, and then the chase where O.J. Simpson was filmed from the air trying to get away from police who wanted to ask him questions. It was an astonishing thing, and you're absolutely right. I think the impact of that has been dulled by subsequent cases that we've had, but at the time it was really extraordinary and set in motion, as Stig was saying, just a whole expectation of what we should be able to see as viewers when something like that happens. I mean, it certainly is worth noting, despite what our previous guest has just been talking about, that it was just 3 years after Simpson's criminal trial that he was found liable in a civil suit which was brought by the victims' families. And he then went on to be convicted for armed robbery as well, for which there was a jail term.
So O.J. Simpson has died. He was 76.